Morning. I'm so happy you decided to join me today. Today is another edition of At the Open Gate, and this is my way of offering to create a community for leaders and managers and during this really challenging time. I'm finding leadership can be very lonely, and it doesn't have to be. And especially now that most of us are in a virtual format, I think it's more important now than ever to, stay connected as leaders. And so today we're going to talk about perspective, and I'm going to work on sharing the screen here real quick. There we go. And just remind you that your team is paying attention to you. It's really your moment as leaders. It's times like this where you really have the opportunity to shine through and make a difference in the lives of other people. I know it's hard. I know the pressure is great, but your team really is paying attention to what you're doing, and they will remember that when the dust settles and things get back to normal. So I just again want to encourage you, and that's what we're here for, is to just give you that support and guidance as you're trying to navigate these waters. I wanted to share a favorite Stephen Covey quote that I ran across recently, that leadership is a choice, not a position. So it really boils down to the choices that we make, big and small, each and every day, that are going to make a difference. So you do have this opportunity to be a great force for good. And so the three things we wanted to talk about today are perspective, which is being authentic, being persistent, and being creative. So let's expand on that a little bit. What does it mean to be authentic, and how do you do that? And I think, again, these are kind of squishy concepts sometimes, and it's helpful if we just break it down into its smaller parts. What does authentic really mean? And really all that means is that you're being consistent. Your actions that you take are consistent, what you believe and what you value. And if you find yourself getting a gut check and things don't quite feel right, I think that's a really good sign and might be worth considering that perhaps in that moment you weren't being truly authentic. I think that's one of the best indicators for ourselves. And not that it's a bad thing. I think we're all trying to navigate very complex lives, and it's hard to be consistent. There's a lot of things and variables that make our choices what we have to do. And sometimes we have to, it's hard to be true to ourselves at all times, 100% of the time. But how do you increase your authenticity? It's what are the steps that you can take, and things like increasing your self-awareness, overcoming self-doubt, and embracing feedback. So increasing self-awareness would be just recognizing that we all do have blind spots, and looking for that feedback, asking trusted mentors, asking a professional to give you that feedback. Or maybe even simply asking your team a couple questions like, what am I doing that's contributing to the team effectiveness? And what maybe is getting in the way of my being effective for you as a team? And you can also spread that question out amongst your team. They're great questions to ask. Or you may go as robust as some sort of a assessment, like a DISC profile or a strengths finder, which are good ways to get feedback about self, or even going the full extent to a 360 type of feedback. All those are ways of increasing awareness about yourself and getting knowledge and little bits of information. The bigger one, I think, is overcoming self-doubt. We all, I think, have a tendency to question our abilities and our strengths, and I think it's a common thing that a lot of the folks that I work with do. And I think one of the easiest ways to start overcoming that is really focusing on what are the things that I do well and reflecting on that. I think it's easy to forget, especially those of us that have been working for a while. We tend to focus on the things that we did, or remember the things we did well maybe 10, 15 years ago. But what we're doing today seems to become commonplace. And so we minimize and discount the successes that we have, and tend to think of it as, well, I'm just doing my job, or it's just the norm, or everybody does it. And I think it takes a concerted effort to really focus on and remember those things that you're doing well. Can be a first step. A couple other practical tools, something as simple as keeping a wins folder. I like to keep a electronic file and a hard copy file of when somebody sends me a positive affirmation, an email or a card or something like that. I retain those things, and then for the times when I may be questioning my effectiveness, I return back to that to give myself a shot, so I can get out of that doubting place, because it's not going to help you as a leader if you're doubting yourself. And then last, embracing feedback. Sometimes we get feedback and we can dismiss it, or we minimize it, or maybe even get defensive about it. And so we tend not to hear that feedback. And again, so then we're not paying attention to our blind spots, or doing anything about those things that we're not consciously aware of. And so maybe the way to think about feedback is simply look at it as a gift, as something that can help you better yourself and be a more positive person. And if you do find yourself being maybe triggered by feedback in a negative way, worth asking yourself, and again, working with a trusted mentor or colleague that can, or professional that can help you kind of work through that. And being persistent. The things I want to encourage you to remember today is that, remember that you as a leader are the champion of your mission. And it's incumbent on us to remind our teams frequently. I think, again, we get caught up in the daily tactical tasks that we have to get done, and we forget about the bigger picture. So I want to encourage you to just remember, what is our rallying cry, like we talked about last week? What are the ways that I can remind myself to remind my team? I mean, is it as simple as putting something on my calendar to remind my team today, or keeping images up where we're seeing it frequently? And the other thing I think that we tend to do is take it all on ourselves. That is just my mission and my role to be the reminder and the champion for the team, where really you can spread the burden and encourage your team. Ask them, involve them. What are some ways that they can contribute to continually keeping the mission in front of everybody? How can they support you in that? And then communicating clearly. Again, we talked about that last week. That's such a critical part of being an effective leader, and yet one that I think gets overlooked, because we think we've communicated something one time, it's out there, everybody should pick up on it. And I would say, repeat things often. The old mantra, say it, explain it, say it again, is something to really embrace and remember as part of what we need to be doing as leaders. And last, be creative. And what do I mean by that? And I hear so many folks say, well, I'm not a creative person, especially if I'm not in an arts type role, if I'm more of a number cruncher, or I'm an engineer, or we tend to think of ourselves as not creative if we're not in an artistic type of a role. And nothing could be further from the truth on that. What creativity really means is simply looking at something in a different way or novel way. And it can be expressed through all sorts of skills and talents. So I want you really to internalize that. It's really about being willing to try new things. And so being creative with your team, encouraging them, and some questions you can ask, simple things like, how can I think about, or how can we think about this in a different way? Why are we doing this? There's a question to pose to your team. What if we did the exact opposite? And if we had unlimited time and money, how could we fix this problem? So just a few questions to prime the pump. But again, as a facilitator of your team, you have an immense opportunity to be creative, to encourage your team to be creative, to be problem solvers. And that's what my hope for you is, that you can embrace it and embrace your creative side. So remember that we are all stronger together. And again, this is, we want to offer the community for you. We do have weekly Zoom calls for supervisors and managers on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Our next call is coming up on April 29th. It's Counterintuitive Actions for Overwhelming Times. So you can explore a little bit deeper and have some Q&A with your colleagues. It's really been a fun time, the folks that have joined the call, so I hope you can join us as well. Simply go to the link here or go to opengateresources.com, our events calendar, and you can find the registration there. So with that, I want to again thank you for all that you do, and hope that you have a great day. Take good care.